Hi, my name is Thandanani Gumede. I'm known as Thanda for short, which is a Zulu name that means love one another. So love is a verb. I am an integrated artist all the way from Durban in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. So in South Africa, as you might know, when people say apartheid, what does that mean and what does music have to do with it? The government at the time was trying to make sure that people were separated. But jazz musicians started creating music and collaborating with people of different races, which was something that was frowned upon and illegal in South Africa. Jazz music literally was taking on apartheid head on. So we then found musicians like Miriam Makeba, who sang the song. We found people like Hugh Masekela having to go to exile because they were people who were making sure that although South Africa limited the encounters of people based on race, they made sure that jazz ensured that there was an encounter not only between people of the same color, but people of different colors or races or whatever box you might put in. So then as I grew up in South Africa, I was quite fortunate to encounter people like Andile Mselego, Xolani Sithole, and Duduzo Makhathini. And these are people, some of them were students of jazz, others are award-winning artists in South Africa at the moment. And that actually influenced me in gospel music and jazz. So that is my background. Because I grew up obviously in the townships as a result of apartheid. There was no encounter with people who are different from me, but it started with that culture of just absorbing exclusively traditional culture and Zulu culture and Xhosa culture. But through music, that opened doors for me to then be able to not only just be around people who looked like me and sounded like me as well, but it actually gave me an opportunity to come to the United Kingdom and to start collaborating with people who were different from me and similar to me in different ways. And so this is where my journey began. For me, for instance, music and education are interchangeable. As a person of Zulu and Xhosa heritage, our history was not recorded down, but it was actually orally relayed and transmitted from the older generation to the younger generation through music and through poetry, etc. So there is a lot in our music that ensures that there is education, there is language, there is culture. When I reached the United Kingdom, I started my own company called Zulu Tradition that began to tour around the United Kingdom, but it also had a program for schools. Education was a huge and integral part in everything that we were doing. So for instance, if we did a showcase, we would perform for people, but we also had to deconstruct what we did and be able to explain and expand the significance of the music that we were doing to our culture. The interesting thing, or the turning point in terms of those collaborations, was when we were approached by a gentleman called Dave Evans. Dave Evans was a musician who was based here in the UK, an educator as well, who had visited South Africa, took students from South Africa to Durban, and then he approached us to collaborate together so that we could raise funds to pay for South African students to come to the UK and perform in Leeds. But within these collaborations, we started different projects together. One of the projects we worked in was something called the pilots of the first ever BAME resonance with Opera North. Now, this was an interesting experience because this was the time where instead of just me being Zulu when I'm with Zulu tradition, or me having to sound American when I was singing in church, or me sounding jazzy when I'm in a band like Ubunye. This was the time where I actually had to find my own voice and navigate between different experiences and different cultures. And to say, given everything that I've been exposed to, who am I in this entire experience? So with the People's Lullabies, we had to work with different organizations who were Opera North's partner groups. It was organizations like Caring for Life that supported people with learning disabilities. There were groups that were for ex-offenders, women ex-offenders, and even old people's homes. So, for instance, in encountering these different people, it was interesting to see the different contexts. So, when we were working with different people, the first session was normally about me as a performer, Dave as a performer, showcasing what we can do. But ultimately, the goal wasn't just about us performing, but getting them to replace us so that they took the stage and told their own stories. Amongst the people that we encountered, there was a lady from Nigeria. We were in this church that was empty, beautiful building. And she sang this beautiful song that I could not understand in the language, and which was an interesting thing to experience as well, because normally when I sing in Zulu, people don't understand me. So it was nice to be the one who did not understand the lyric, but could totally get the emotion and the tone behind the story. Now, she sang the song so easily. And then when it was time to record the songs, because we wanted to bring in a filming crew that was going to record them, then it became very tense. It was very difficult for her, bless. You know, she got obviously intimidated to think, how can I tell my story? How can I stand in front of these cameras and sing to different people? It took a lot of time to actually try and talk her into getting back there on stage. I struggle with stage fright and confidence too. So I could really relate what she was going through. Eventually, we started thinking about, hey, don't worry about this as a performance or as about telling the whole story. Just think about sound, the first note, and your breathing. You know, just inhale and think, this first note is going to be my exhalation, and then I will start telling my story. And it was like taking something one day at a time, but instead of one day at a time, it was like 1 minute at a time, one note at a time. And when she did that, we couldn't get her to stop singing, you know, and that was a beautiful thing to experience. Another example was when we walked into an entirely different context. We were coming from a church where we had a Nigerian song, and then we went into a care home and we were just thrown into this room of people who were interested in singing church songs, and it was more of a spiritual thing. There was this gentleman who was just quiet and still, but he was really animated when we asked him about his favorite music. He came to life and he started singing in this beautiful voice with such character, you know, and he was singing a jazz standard. And then there was also a lady who was singing in Punjabi, you know, although she couldn't understand English, but when you said lullaby, the song you sang growing up, somebody translated and she started singing. And it was so beautiful to see the contrast between, you know, these microtonal scales and the things that she was singing. And eventually we found this, I'll say, grandma, beautiful soul, started singing another song. It took me back to the days when I used to go to church, and everything there was like based on the minor pentatonic scale. We sang in that scale, and it was the blues scale, you know, we preached in the scale. Everything was there. And the beautiful thing about her song was that it was repetitive, but when you kept on singing that same line, it's like you could see her journey and the things she went through and what the song meant to her. And that was the beautiful thing about gospel music in the townships, I guess. We did not have overhead projectors. We could not afford to have a lot of lyrics. So the lyrics were repetitive, but then it encouraged you or challenged you as a performer to make sure that your audience is engaged. So it forced you, or rather created an environment that actually challenged you to start embellishing and enhancing the melody and improvising by infusing your own story into the song. So she never sang the same thing twice, you know, and her scales were amazing. That project, the Lullaby project, it seemed to be customized for each and every individual that was involved, and they told their own stories. And it culminated actually in the screening of all these lullabies at on the big screen at Every Man's Cinema in Trinity in Leeds, and just to sit there and watch that on the big screen that was happening in these different remote places, the Irish lullaby, the Nigerian song, the gospel song, and it was nice to see people prioritizing the story and the message and using music as a conduit to tell that story. Even when they were like, we are not professionals, we are not this, we are not that. They were in a place or a position where they can tell the story from a position of their comfort while they were stepping into their comfort zone and saying, hey, I don't think I could sing. Like, actually, you can sing. And they got every note right, but more importantly, the aesthetic and of the song felt so authentic, so real, and so genuine. And that was a beautiful thing about the project.
1, 2, 3, 4, hoedje van, hoedje van. 1, 2, 3, 4, hoedje van papier.